Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. New immigration statistics to bring you and analyse at 9:30. We're also live on a beach in Calais where some small boats have been intercepted today. Plus, as Fukushima starts releasing treated radioactive water from its plant, we'll talk to one of the Japanese Prime Minister's top team. It's Thursday, the 24th of August. Russian authorities claim the Wagner boss was a passenger on this plane that crashed near Moscow. We'll analyse, was Prigozhin on board? And was this Putin's revenge?
You don't stop this.
Is your loyalty to Donald Trump going to put you in jail?
We're on the trail of Donald Trump's former lawyer who's turned himself in over election fraud charges as his former boss discusses the prospect of civil war.
There's a level of passion that I've never seen. There's a level of hatred that I've never seen, and that's probably a bad combination.
Students across the country are learning their GCSE grades, with results expected to be down to pre-pandemic levels.
Lives in the balance. A new look at what the children rescued from a stricken Pakistani cable car went through. The cryptic ad promising satisfaction when you say, "Give me shelter," hints at what's next for one of the world's biggest bands. Good morning, thanks for joining us. We begin with the plane crash that Russian authorities claim the Wagner boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was a passenger on. The man, who was once Putin's chef and strongman, ended up masterminding the mutinous march towards Moscow. A government minister this morning told us that they are monitoring the situation, but it's important not to jump to conclusions. Well, the plane is believed to have crashed in the northern area of the Tver region, which is around 200 miles north of Moscow. According to Russia's aviation agency, all 10 people on board were killed. Our Moscow correspondent Diana Magne has this report from Russia.
First, there is just a plume of white smoke, and then it is clear it's a plane tumbling out of the sky. Russia's aviation authority says Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin was killed on that plane, a man who, since he set his men on Moscow 2 months ago, was perhaps Putin's enemy number one. However, the Kremlin liked to spin it. He and his number two, Dmitry Utkin, now apparently both come to a sticky end. That's if the Russian authorities are to be believed. This moment and the 24 hours preceding it in Rostov-on-Don in June were unforgivable for Vladimir Putin, an act of mutiny by the Wagner leader against Russia's top military command, then calling his men off halfway to the capital in exchange for supposed exile in Belarus. But it didn't seem much like exile. Prigozhin popping up in St. Petersburg, hobnobbing with African dignitaries and continuing to rail against the way the Ukraine war was being run from Belarus. The last we saw of him was this video published earlier in the week, most probably in the African Sahel, where Prigozhin said that Wagner would make Russia even greater and Africa even more free. But his days were likely numbered.
It looks as though it may well be a revenge attack by someone in the elite, possibly somebody very senior, on Prigozhin. And in fact, we had heard some weeks ago from a source that a contract had in fact been put out on Prigozhin in Russia by senior members of the business communities.
As the news broke, President Putin appeared at a commemorative event for the World War II battle at Kursk, holding a minute's silence for the Soviet dead as the wreckage of the plane burned. From the US, President Biden had this to say.
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised. There's not much that happens when Russia is not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
No doubt clarity will be a long time coming. But Prigozhin is a man who courts attention, and if he is not dead, then we will likely hear from him soon. And if he is, there will be no tears shed in the Kremlin.
Well, in the last hour, we've had this in from the Investigative Committee of Russia.
The main investigation department of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation has opened a criminal case on the grounds of a crime under Article 263 of the Criminal Code. This is violation of traffic safety rules and the operation of air transport. The business jet, traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg, crashed in Tver region. According to preliminary data, all 10 people on board have died. An investigation team has left for the scene. All necessary forensic examinations will be appointed and a set of investigative actions will be carried out to determine the causes of the plane crash.
Well, our Moscow correspondent Diana Magnay joins us from St. Petersburg, which is where Yevgeny Prigozhin was from. Also, she's outside the disbanded headquarters of the Wagner mercenary group. And Diana, is there any doubt where you are of what happened last night?
Well, I think there's a lot of doubt about how exactly it happened, but I think the conclusion is that Yevgeny Prigozhin, as the aviation agency says, is dead. And you'll see, here we have a memorial, and we've been here probably about 15 minutes, and people have been bringing flowers. In fact, here we have somebody else coming to bring flowers in memory of Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was obviously dear to the hearts of many people here in St. Petersburg. This was the place he was from. He will have recruited a lot of his men here. I talked to two of them. One of them said, I'm just not going to give any comments to foreign media. I asked another who he thought was behind it all, and he said somebody who wants to set up Vladimir Putin. I'll just show you the Wagner headquarters. It was sort of a hub for all things defence technology when it was set up and opened to great fanfare in November last year. And if you think about the tremendous fall from grace and everything that has happened in the intervening 10 months, from the opening of this establishment to Yevgeny Prigozhin's battle for Bakhmut, where tens of thousands of his men died, so many of them former convicts, to his mutiny march on Moscow, and now 2 months to the day since, or 1 day in between, that he called his men off, now this plane crash. I think the message that certainly is being sent to the elites in this country is nobody is indispensable, whatever you do for Russia. If you stand up against the Kremlin, you cannot be sure that you will come out of it well.
Diana, thank you. Well, earlier in the programme, I asked former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele and the former Chief of the General Staff, General Lord Dannatt, their thoughts on who could be behind the crash.
I think it's probably most likely that even if it wasn't ordered by Putin directly, it was by someone who knows what Putin would have wished and has ensured the elimination of Prigozhin has happened. So I think on the balance of probabilities, say this is Putin's doing.
One possibility, of course, is that this is an attack on him by a rival within Wagner, but certainly it's an inside job. The suggestion is that it may have been a bomb in a wine crate, and if so, that's a kind of ironic ending, really, for Putin's caterer.
Well, I'm joined now by our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, and also by security and defence analyst, Michael Clark. And, if it was a bomb in a wine crate, Dominic, that's quite an ignominious end, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we'll hear all sorts of explanations today and in the days and months to come. I think one striking thing to note is that during the day, that extraordinary day of the abortive coup, a Russian Air Force plane was shot down. And it fell out of the sky, and it was one of the great sort of striking images of that day, because it really undermined the Putin regime that there was a mercenary group marching on Moscow, shooting planes down. And what we saw yesterday was very similar. It was a plane apparently either shot down or blown up and tumbling out of the sky in a very similar way. And I think that symmetry may have been intentional or may not, but it certainly, I think it is. This is, the message here is that a man who lived by the sword or by the missile has died by the missile. And so was it an act of revenge? Most likely, or actually has he got away? It's out of a film script. It's kind of, is he a villain who's got away to live another day? We'll never know the answer, I think, entirely truthfully. But
there were reports last night that there was some people had said they'd seen a second plane
zigzagging behind it. Exactly, yeah. But we're never going to know for sure. And I think that's probably going to suit Putin to a certain extent. It is out of a film script, but we shouldn't over-romanticise Prigozhin. He was a man whose favourite form of execution was was smashing a living person's head with a sledgehammer. He took thousands of people out of Russian jails, rapists and murderers, and took them into a war zone.